Just introduce it, pledge of allegiance, Ms. Balbuena, public comment, which we don't have any, folks, and then turn it over to me. Antoinette ran, she just asked me if I needed it. I'm like, yeah, he needs it. And she ran to go get it. Is who?
Ms. Balbuena.
She's right behind you.
She's right behind you, yes.
Hello, everyone. Before we get started, I have a special announcement from our translator, Ms. Balbuena.
Thank you, President Lopez. Thank you, President López. Buenas tardes. Habla Paula Balbuena. Si necesita servicios de interpretación al español, por favor llame al 1805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 928-303-620 más la tecla numeral. Este es un número totalmente gratis. Nuevamente, llame al número de teléfono 1805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 928-303-620 más la tecla numeral. También puede acceder a estas instrucciones en nuestro sitio web en mcs4kids.com, dirigiéndose a la parte inferior de la página en Quick Links y haciendo clic en Board Agendas para ir a la agenda de esta noche. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Balbuena. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Modesto City Schools Board Workshop of February 28, 2022. Would everyone please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And I will make a note that that our Vice President Chad Brown is via Teams for this evening. Thank you. Ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before we get started, I'd like to take roll call. I'll call this meeting to order first. And I'll take roll call. Trustee West.
Here.
Trustee Mejia.
Here.
Trustee Marks.
Present.
Trustee Maestas.
Right here.
Trustee Irvin.
Here.
Vice President Brown.
Here by way of Teams.
Perfect. Thank you. And President Lopez here. So I'm going to, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to read a little. We want to let you know, for those people that are wanting to make a public comment, you're allowed to do so before noon of the day of our board meeting, and if not in person, via voicemail and email. Those that have done that we have received it. I know that we have received one for today. That is, you'll have a copy of available to us, the board members, and the public as well in the back. We also encourage those that want to make a public comment tonight that they fill out a card and give it to Ms. Antoinette, which is in the back, and we'll be doing public comments in a little bit. But I want to transfer it over to Superintendent Noguchi for welcome and announcements.
Perfect. Thank you, President Lopez. I just want to welcome everyone here tonight, both virtually and the folks in the room. I always like workshops and special board meetings because it gives us an opportunity to just have a conversation rather than it being so scripted and going back and forth with our input. And so really this is an opportunity to learn about a few things that we've been working on, and more importantly is really get your feedback and your input and your dialogue around two areas. One, with the changing of bell schedules for next year, really caused by, to a large degree, SB 328. We look forward to your feedback and input on that presentation. And then also for the board members that went to CSBA, which I think all of you did, there were a number of you that asked about the state's roadmap. There's an EL roadmap that the California Department of Education puts out, and we're going to learn about it today. So you're going to learn about what's in that roadmap and how our programs align to the roadmap. And if there's something that you think that perhaps might be helpful for our kids or our parents, this would be a good time to even add more than just what's on that roadmap. So really it's a learning session around our EL programs aligned to California roadmap. And then lastly, the work that we've put together for our bell schedule. So look forward to the discussion, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, President Lopez.
Thank you very much. And can everyone hear me? Yeah. This takes us to the period for public presentations. Is there any cards for us this evening? Seeing none, I will take us to B1, which is report on TK 12 bell schedule for 2022-2023 SB 328. And that is Mr. Serling.
Thank you. Good evening, President Lopez, Board of Trustees. Tonight, you will hear a presentation focusing on adjusting school start times to comply with Senate Bill 328. And as Dr. Noguchi stated in her welcome, and we want to allow time for board members to give us their perspectives or your perspectives on the various scenarios that you're going to see around bell time modeling. With me to my left, you probably have seen the name or heard the name. Ryan Hahn will be joining us with the presentation. Ryan Hahn has been with us about a year and a half now. He was, and his company was brought on in advance of SB 328. We knew it had been signed into law, and so Ryan was brought on to help us consult with different bell time models in order for us to comply with SB 328. And as you'll see in the presentation, the reason is because we can't be at 34 sites at one time. And so it caused us to take a look at our existing operations and how's that going to look after July 1 once SB 328 is implemented. So with that, the purpose of the presentation is we will again define Senate Bill 328. We'll talk about our current transportation information around our routes and our operations. Our current TK-12 bell times, alternative TK-12 bell time scenarios, SB 328 task force recommendations, next steps, and then, as mentioned, board member perspectives. Senate Bill 328 just tells us that the school day for high schools, including high schools operated as charter schools, shall begin no earlier than 8:30 a.m. The school day for middle schools, including middle schools operated as charter schools, shall begin no earlier than 8 a.m. Currently, all of our junior high schools start at 9 a.m., so we're already, without any adjustments needed, we are already in compliance with SB 328 at our junior high schools. Just again, a brief definition as to what is the school day. The school day has the same meaning as defined for purposes of calculating average daily attendance. This section does not prohibit offering classes or activities to a limited number of pupils before the start of the school day that do not generate average daily attendance for purposes of computing any apportionments of state funding or our annual instructional minutes. That is referring to zero period. So there's nothing that will keep us from having a zero period next year. That it can start before 8:30 in the morning. We just cannot use the minutes of zero period in our calculation for both the daily instructional minutes and the annual instructional minutes for grades 9 through 12. And then again, finally, this section shall be implemented by middle schools and high schools no later than July 1 of 2022. This July 1 is when we have to begin the implementation.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? All right. Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a wonderful process working with Modesto City Schools in the community. through this long project. We started actually in around October of 2020 and started the task force at that time. I did a board presentation in December of that year to kind of talk about the work that was going to go into this. And we're going to talk a little bit about our current transportation information and kind of talk about why it's so important that we consider the transportation system as a whole when we're talking about bell times and how that provides access for students in our district to get to school. So we currently drop off our high school students 35 to 45 minutes before their bell time, before the first period bell time. Part of that is because we shuttle students around to different buildings. It gives them time to have breakfast, and for a myriad of different reasons, that's the way the routes are set up. Elementary school times are staggered across a 30-minute span, beginning at 8:23 to 8:53. Primarily, that was used to shuttle students that were in a situation where their school was full, and we'd move them to another location. And that's not happening nearly as much anymore. K-6 students are dropped 15 to 20 minutes prior to the start of school, and the buses are used again for junior high school students. We use approximately 35 buses for our high school runs, and 18 for elementary and 12 for junior high. And it's important to note in all of these different scenarios and kind of the reasoning and how the transportation system functions, nothing can interfere with the high school runs. Since we use all of our assets at that time, you'll notice in these different scenarios that junior high and elementary cannot run while those runs are running. So if you look at our current scenario, you will see by the yellow bars, and I kind of want to just explain the key briefly down here. Your elementary school day is the blue area, and the elementary runs are the blue bars prior to the school day. Middle school is green, high school is the yellow. And it's important to note that from an analytics perspective, our average trip lengths for elementary are 40 minutes, 22 minutes for middle school or junior high, and 26 minutes for high school. And you'll notice that we just clarified that the school buses are all used at high school time. So we have them all out running at the 6 o'clock hour, dropping shortly after 7:15 or 7:20-ish. Then those buses are immediately reutilized to go into the elementary school routes. And then they stagger all through their elementary routes all the way down to junior high, where the buses are used for 12 of those buses are used for junior high school.
So, and because this is a workshop, and there's a lot of data on here, there's a lot of colors. I mean, we have allocated some time at the end, obviously, for board member input and perspectives. But if there's something that comes up on one of these slides, please feel free to raise your hand or ask a question, because there's a lot on here to digest, and Ryan will do a good job of trying to explain it. But please feel free if you have any questions during the slide to ask at that point in time.
So whenever I do this work for schools, we always look at a way to create a scenario with the least impact for the stakeholders involved. This is moving bell times is a big deal for people trying to get to work, for people trying to move students to multiple buildings if they have several different students of different ages in the district, and it's a big deal for us, right? I mean, we've got to be able to provide reasonable services to make sure that students are taken care of. So scenario one, even though they're not staggered in that scenario that we just showed you in the current scenario, this would for just kind of creating a graphic that you can see a little bit better. Scenario one pretty much allows compliance with Senate Bill 328 for high school time with a staggered high school, just like we have now. We have all of our high schools except for one that operate at the earlier time, which if you look on your current scenario slide, it shows, and one of them is later, and that's they have different programs at that school, LI and some different things that we move students around to. But this would primarily allow elementary students to be picked up first, Then they would go into their elementary runs, and junior high would remain the same. So this would create compliance with Senate Bill 328, least impact overall to the system. About 3,500 of our students ride the school bus on the general ed side, and there's about 700 or 800 that ride on the special ed side that store transports out of 30,000, roughly 30,000 students in the district. This is the least impacting, and elementary students are picked up and dropped off at earlier times. So this would create a scenario where we would be picking up at the 6 o'clock hour for elementary, but it is the least impacting overall for bell times. There would just be a much earlier arrival for them. Scenario 2, this places high school at the front of the line, compliance with a standardized bell time for all high schools. Because all of the assets can be used to move students around first in the morning. That's the rationale for that, so you don't have to worry about staggering the times to get students to different buildings if it's necessary. Buses are then reutilized for elementary, they're starting later in the morning, closer to the 9 o'clock hour. Junior high remains the same. Scenario 3, junior high school students are picked up at the late 6 o'clock hour. Still compliant with Senate Bill 328, but they're moved to the first of the line, and they're at their building well in advance. Buses are reutilized for high school with a staggered bell time for high schools, and then we move into elementaries that are starting at the 9 and 9:15 time frame, and yeah, that's scenario 3. Scenario 4. Junior high and elementary are moved together to the earlier start times, and that is because we know with the current configuration of our bus routing system that elementary students and junior high school students can be transported at the same time with the number of fleet assets that we own and drivers that we have. Then high school is our latest starting with an 8:45 and 9 o'clock stagger, and this is to allow for Language Institute and Elliott transfers. This does have an impact on zero period opportunities for high school. Since the buses are all utilized before high school starts, the opportunities for zero period are limited for transportation use. Scenario number 5, we have a staggered elementary start. Where we're kind of standardize the elementary schools to where they're clumped in an early and a late category, and then they move into high school, and then they're dropping junior high staggered high school time. But this elementary arrival time is minimized versus scenario 1. Elementary times are more closely aligned, and staggered high school start times still exist. In our last scenario tonight to talk about is scenario 6. And you'll notice this is the only one where the runs are out of order. So you can see that high school is dropped off first, similar to what we do now, but it allows all students accessing transportation services to be able to get to school for zero period. Then it allows a very similar bell structure for elementary schools that we have now. Schools are not moving. I think it's by more than 20-ish minutes to arrive at this kind of this stagger here of 8:15 and 8:30 for elementary, and then junior high remains unchanged at this time.
So as Ryan mentioned earlier, we did see this coming, as most school districts did, and we did form an SB 328 task force. Some of the board members have been on that committee and heard the conversations. But some considerations, some points of interest that the committee brought up as we focused on bell times and transportation. It was more than just, okay, what time do we have to get the students to school? What are some considerations that this committee would like us to focus on when we look at, as Ryan talked earlier, transportation as a whole system across TK and 12th grades, not just focusing on 9-12. And so these are some things that the task force brought up, that when we went through and we were putting together our scenarios, we wanted to focus on these important items that were important to the committee. Equity, access for all students, school start and end times. That was the point of the committee, but that wasn't the sole point. 0 and 8 periods, access to 0 and 8 periods. That was important for many of the committee members. Was how can we model our transportation system that would provide more access for our high school students? Child care and impact on families. That was important. Logistics needed to provide educational and operational services. That's important to transportation. How can we do that? As Ryan talked about, we have a finite number of assets at the moment. So what's the best way to utilize our assets? And then soliciting feedback. It was important to the committee. While this was mandated on us, we did not want to give the appearance that we're mandating it on all of our stakeholders that we have. So next steps, there is an instructional minutes committee right now that is underway that is reviewing our instructional minute offerings. We're waiting to finalize the recommendations from the instructional minute committee that will help us determine the end of school time. We're focusing, this presentation, as I mentioned, is focusing on the start. We know what the start of the day is going to be. We know what the start of the day has to be. And so this part of the next step is the work that's being done in the instructional minute committee. Communicate any bell time changes to the school sites. That's going to need to be done well in advance, not only for the school site, but to our parents, to our communities, which is continue the communicating with our parents and communities. Ryan has had, at this point, 3, I believe, virtual meetings regarding SB 328 implementation. Hopefully now we can have more face-to-face, in-person meetings over the next 2 or 3 months, but we're not stopping. Ryan is looking for any and all committees that are out there to go speak to share this information. Our communications department does an outstanding job of communicating via social media on the upcoming changes, and then working with students and school sites to help us identify enrichment and remediation needs for high school students. So if one of these scenarios, as mentioned, we're getting there early enough for these services, what are those services going to look like? What do the students want to see in those services, other than getting them there in time for breakfast, which is going to be a positive thing, but what other services can we provide for our students as well? So with that, that's the end of the presentation. I'm sure there's some questions. There's a lot of information to digest. There's 6 different scenarios. So we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. And we're first going to go out to the public. If there's any comments, seeing no comments from the public, we'll move it back to questions from the board. So I saw Trustee Maestas and then Trustee Urban. And then sorry if you guys came first, but I saw Trustee West after that. So we'll start with Trustee Maestas.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation. I had an opportunity to log into the online presentation last week. Was it on Thursday? This made a whole lot more sense than that one did. I just a little bit of feedback. I was a little lost on that one. It was very quick. I thought I would get a lot more out of it, and it just was basically like, what are we doing? Here's the problem. Here's the tricky part about it with the school times and the these things here. But that now seeing this, it makes a whole lot more sense. So I don't remember who was running that, but it makes a whole lot more sense to me. I have a couple of questions. How many students do we know what the proportion of bused students are that are in a 0 period? Or do you have to go figure that out? find that
Speak a
info?
little bit to it. So right now, a lot of those students are riding the regular high school buses to get there and entering zero period just shortly after it starts or around there. But when I had a number figure on that, there were about several. I think there was about 300 to 400 students who were participating riding the bus at one point when we had rosters.
Okay. Do we know what proportion that is of the high school bus riders?
Yeah, so we transport about depending on the day, depending on what's going on with COVID and whatnot. At any given time, we have about, I'd say, 1,800 to 2,000 high school students that can ride the bus. That's our highest ridership.
Okay. It's 2,300. Okay. For the 1,700 students that ride the bus that aren't in a zero period, what do they do in that hour and a half or whatever that long period of time is there that they're on campus?
Well, currently, it's 30 to 45 minutes. I mean, our current scenario is getting them there.
Right, 35,
30 to
yeah.
45 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
I would defer to the educational side, possibly for that. As to, other than breakfast, I know we have, breakfast offerings for the students that arrive in time for breakfast, but other than that, I'm not aware of site activities that those students can have, but maybe.
So I can have Mr. Godot and perhaps Mr. Hertz speak to what's happening this year for that time frame. As you reminded, you probably have forgotten, this has been a couple months ago, but we have the Extended Learning Opportunities Grant, which is a significant amount of money to extend out days or hours within the day for engagement of students, both enrichment but also remediation. So next year, our plans, what we're doing this year is going to be very different than what we have planned for next year and the opportunities for kids next year as we work with Mr. Lomelli and his team on providing before school opportunities in a variety of areas. So that is something that is in the works. But as far as what's going on now, I can turn it over to Mr. Godot or perhaps Mr. Herbst.
Yeah, thank you. I would say now versus next year will look differently just because of the dynamics at play. Currently, many of our students that are transported may not have access to zero period courses, and that was one of the things that Mr. Hahn referenced in the task force is coming up as just the concern of access for students that do ride the bus in the mornings. With the pushing back of the start of the day, we anticipate that master scheduling will reflect some more opportunities in zero period course offerings just because of the way that the school day is going to kind of roll in the afternoon. So, availability of staff that want to teach a zero period, I'm going to make some assumptions here, will probably increase, as well as supports for students as referenced by Superintendent Noguchi that we'll be implementing next year. So I would anticipate that number is going to increase the number of students accessing zero period next year, as well as tutoring supports, teachers before school availability, those types of things.
Do we have high demand for zero periods? Like, do we generally like max those out and then not have space?
It depends on the school site, from site to site. But again, I think the factors at play next year will look differently than the factors at play this year and in the years previous as to how much we implement a zero period.
Okay.
I would also add that there may be other activities that occur before school. For example, athletics. There may be athletic practices that run before school next year with an 8:30 start. Just, different options for different folks depending on what the dynamics are.
The only thing that I would want to add is, and Associate Superintendent Godot has mentioned this before, and that's the idea of clubs. With the later dismissal time, odds are we might have a lot more teachers more interested in doing the before school type club activity. I think it actually bodes well for greater engagement for kids that traditionally have struggled to stay in clubs or athletics after school because of transportation.
Because of bus transportation? Okay. Okay. And then I had one more question. What are the percent of kids? I'm looking at these scenarios, and in scenario 1, we have the case where you have. I'm looking at everything before 7 a.m. With time changes that could be that could be in the dark, right? With when we just for when we're thinking about the few weeks after a time change. Roughly how many kids are there in that? That looks to be like, I mean, if I'm looking at a chart here, that would be around a 7:45 time frame, as opposed to scenario 6, where that looks more like a 6:30 time frame for that high school. Right now, the current scenario looks like it's even before 6:30. How many not that I want any little kids standing out in the dark, but how many would that be in scenario 1 as opposed to the number of students in scenario 6?
We have I mean, on any given day, it varies, but about 1,200 of our students are TK8 students, or that would be part of scenario 1, the blue bars earlier in the day. We have probably about 1,200 students is a good number to use just to have an idea how many students that would impact.
Okay. How many high school students do we have running the bus? You said 2,000? Is that right?
1,800 to
18 to 2,000, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I mean, I have some other comments, but those are my real big questions. So I'll let the other board members ask their questions.
And I just,
Thanks.
real quick, thank you for your comments. The very first one, we are sensitive to what we share, how much we share with the public before we get an opportunity to share it with either our employees or the board. And so currently, as you point out, our SB 328 informational meetings are just that. It's about the law and compliance with the law, because we're very sensitive to sharing this before anybody else gets to see it. That's just the way we've chosen to operate. We wanted the board to see this first before it's out in the public as part of those forums.
Yeah, I don't mean to say it wasn't like not enough information. I just didn't understand the graphs.
Sure.
The first time I saw them on the digital, on the screen. This makes a whole lot more sense to me.
Thank you.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, we have Trustee Irvin, and then
Yes, actually, I have a couple questions. One actually related to the daylight savings when it's that early in the morning. Have we gave any considerations to safety concerns during that time when it gets dark? It's still dark, 6:30 in the morning. Safety for the students and staff, on the buses during that time.
We have had some very spirited internal conversations about that very issue, especially scenario 1, when you're talking about our youngest learners being the ones that are picked up the earliest and first. So yes, we do try to take into consideration safety first as well. And things like this, those that make decisions in Sacramento didn't really ask about those situations, but we do. We've had we've had some very passionate conversations about what does that mean for those youngest students to be walking to the bus stop in the dark during those months that you mentioned.
Okay, and then my next question had to do as far as the scenarios. What is staff recommending as probably the best possible scenario? Because I see scenario 1 is the only one that has compliant with SB 328. And so I don't know if we can assume that the rest of them are compliant as well, but
That is correct, and I apologize. They're all compliant with SB 328. The scenario 1 was kind of our first our first attempt at, okay, how do we comply with SB 328 for 912 and not move any other starting time, meaning not move the start of the school for any other school. And so that was scenario one. And in order to do that, that's what it would take. Elementary students would need to be picked up first, dropped off first, and be at their school maybe up to an hour before the start of the school day, the current existing start of the school day. That was kind of and I don't want to say, that was kind of a simple way to figure it out. That required no changing. As we worked through other scenarios, there's some we liked, some we didn't like. And again, from the lens of transportation, which is how these scenarios were derived. Scenario 6, we came to kind of land on scenario 6 as to it created a lot of benefits that us in transportation have been looking at for some time. It really helps instead of, as Ryan pointed out early on, and currently we have 6 different starting times across our 22 elementary school sites. So this combines that and consolidates it to 2 different blocks of times for us to start elementary. It standardized things a little bit. It keeps our junior high the same, but it also consolidates or standardizes all of our high schools. So Davis no longer starts later than the other high schools. All high schools would be starting at 8:30, and we're able to get our bus riders there early enough to have access to additional supports, whether that's 0 period, club activities, athletics, whatever that may be. It gives us the opportunity to get those high school students to their location in time for not only breakfast, but other opportunities as well. So from our lens in transportation, that was one that we ended up really liking, and it actually came last. That's why it's scenario 6. But that's why we worked through different scenarios.
Okay. And last one, so will we need to adjust before school programs that we currently have in place during that time in terms of availability?
I believe the answer to that would be yes.
Yeah, that would be us.
So, but we believe that for a high school student, a high school age student, there's more possibilities to make that available
Right.
than there are at the younger age
elementary and- yes.
TK6 student.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we have Trustee West on next, but I wanted to check with Vice President Brown if you had any questions. Just yes or no.
No question.
Perfect. So
Carefully listening to everybody else's side.
thanks. I just remembered that you were on this side to me, so I couldn't see you. So I wanted to check in. Trustee West.
Thank you for this. I agree, it kind of makes things pretty clear when you look at it. I'm leaning towards scenario 6 as well. There are a couple things I like about it. The elementary school kids aren't picked up quite as early. And I think the times work out for working parents because childcare is really an issue for a lot of the elementary school children's parents. I love the big chunk of time for the high school because I think that allows for those clubs and sports and extracurricular activities, academic support classes, enrichment classes. So I think there are a lot of positives to that one. My main question is for students, high school students who are bused, who get there early with that big chunk of time, if they're not involved in enrichment or clubs or sports or tutoring, what are they going to be doing? I would like to make sure that those students are not getting into trouble while they're on campus so early and, they're nothing to do and they're bored. And how do we kind of assure that we're not going to have any kind of those sort of problems with students getting there so early?
I'm going to go back to what Associate Superintendent Brad Godot said. I think it's going to free up a lot of opportunities. Do I think we're going to capture all of them, Trustee West? No, but I think that if we make those offerings meaningful 0 period, I think it's actually going to open up a lot more doors that used to be closed for some of those individuals. So I think it's a matter of what we can provide that gets them interested and wanting to go to a zero period. And I'm confident we're going to get there.
I believe, and Mark could speak to this if I'm incorrect, but I believe our high schools have more supervision, campus supervision, than our elementaries do. And so that's, there will be adult supervision on our high school campuses, or our elementary campuses, depending on which way we go. But they have more readily available time at the high schools than we do at the elementary schools.
Well, I think also important to remember is that high school students are able to drive. And so it's not very long that they have to take the bus. I know my daughter, when she was a sophomore, found an older friend who was able to drive her. And so I think a lot of the students who don't want to arrive early will be able to find alternative transportation.
And something that I'll add, Trustee West, to go with both of those two comments. First, in our board meeting on the 8th, next Monday, we are going to have a report on increasing student voice. This would be a great opportunity to speak to those kids that come, those that we can get to come, but also Mrs. Hewlin around getting input from students on what they would like to see. So really asking the students, because it's something that they want. If it's something that they want to do, they're going to come to school and they're going to be engaged with it. The next piece is, we've been talking about for a couple of years, especially through the lens of equity and access, the need for looking at our high school boundaries. Now, we're not there yet, but as we look at our high school boundaries, really the goal is to create the boundaries such that it is more of a neighborhood school as opposed to the need for busing. So as we move forward in this next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and because it takes a long time to implement that, we would have fewer kids busing as we work towards those high school boundaries, which we'll be doing next fall and into the spring of next year. So there's still some time out there. So 2 things to consider in that.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I have Trustee Marks, Trustee Mejia, and then we'll loop back to a follow-up question by Trustee Maestas. Trustee Marks?
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So just to comment that I am in agreement with scenario 6, that it allots the greatest amount of time for students to have options for getting to school earliest and being able to have those zero period classes and not have any interference with students who aren't able to get there because they don't have transportation and we are it, or they have to walk. So I think that looks good to me, and it's the least amount of change, it looks like, too, even though scenario 1 was given as least amount of change, but at least amount of change for start times. So it looks like students are already being picked up at 6:15 in the morning, dropped off around 7:15, so right now they'll have that extra time. And then junior high doesn't change, and then elementary, like you said, only has 2 start times, which is perfect. I think that would be good, and they wouldn't be picked up before 7:15, so that looks good. I think it works. So that was just my comment, that I thought that looked like the best scenario. Oh, do you want me to have it?
Trustee Mejia?
Yeah, I just have comments. I mean, I want to thank the team. I was part of some of the meetings, and I know a lot of thought and work, and a lot of voices were at the table. So I really, really appreciate it. This didn't come in as just something really quick. So there was a process, and there was a lot of listening sessions. So I just want to commend the team for all the work they put in front. And I was part of several of those meetings, so I really appreciate that. And I do think I'm in support of number 6, because I think it does create opportunities, and we just got to seize them, especially with the opportunities that we have, that we've been kind of getting ahead doing last year and into this coming year. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for your work again, and I like scenario 6.
Yep. So I'd like to give a different perspective, because we can always kind of, just to give a different lens. SB, this is 328, did I say the right number right? SB 328. It came about by a lot of research, and especially from the Academy of, the National Academy of Pediatrics, I believe. There have been there's a lot of data on schools that have already done this and have shown that this is the sleep in particular has increased the health, both mental and physical, of teenagers. It has increased memory retention. It has also increased attendance rates, engagement within classrooms, and it also has increased, well, I don't like to use test scores all the time, but it has also increased test scores. So there's a lot of positives that have come out from the movement. The thing that I'm just a little concerned about is that if we continue to have the lens, and this is just a different lens, if we stick with the lens of like, oh, this is a bunch of opportunities now for students to have more opportunities in the morning, that kind of is contrary to what the health benefits are for the students if they're still getting up in the morning at 6 a.m., even though the school start time is at 8:30. I was in a first period class recently, and there were, 2 or 3 heads pretty much falling asleep and having a hard time to stay awake. And in my 20 years of teaching high school students, that first period has always been the hardest class to even get moving. Even if I had them standing up and engaged, it just was always the toughest class to get going. My third period, fourth period, those seemed to be the most engaging classes of the day. That's right at that 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock time when they're most awake. They also have shown that even the late starting time doesn't decline the energy towards the end of the day as well. The energy continues throughout the day. So I'd like to see if we can continue to collect data on the student on some metrics as we move along. I think scenario 6 is actually a pretty good scenario for the majority of our students. I think it works out. It makes things simple. I prefer like scenario 2, just because it gets everybody out, and it's not too much different than what we're doing now, except for the fact that there's only 2 elementary start times instead of, 5? 6? So just to keep that kind of lens in mind, I'd like to see student data on, if we go with scenario 6, even if we don't, I'd like to see student data on those students that are there early, and how they are doing in comparison with students that aren't, to see if there's any improvement. This is going to be something that I think we need to continually look at data across the next few years to see if what the impact of it is, either positive or negative impact. But we need to see the impact of this, because either way, if it has a positive impact, then we know that it did. If it has a negative impact, then we have something to to use to talk to the powers that be to show that the data that we have. If we don't collect any data, then we're not going to be able to look at that. So those are just kind of a different lens of perspective that I wanted to give as we move forward.
Something to consider. Really, this next year is going to be kind of an anomaly insofar as if you do all decide to change the boundaries to be able to create more of a homeschool, as opposed to we have some spaces they're very far apart, especially for Downey, then the bus schedule will be changing. So we can take a look at the data next year, this time, further in the spring, take a look at those students who have 0 period, those that don't, those that are bused, those that aren't. The reality is even if you are bused, there are other ways of transportation to school. So there are, as we've said, kids that drive their own bus. The city buses are also free for students to be able to take the city bus if they choose to sleep in and then use access that way. But I do agree this year would be a good year to collect some matrix as we look to have something more permanent moving forward, either with or without boundary changes, but it'll be more permanent that following year out. So we can do that.
Yeah, I would be interested in some data on the success of our zero period intervention programs. If you know, if we do offer zero period intervention, how are our students doing? Not just in immediate, but in longitudinal. How are they doing year after year after year? Did it set them up for success in the following year and the following year after that? Because this is where we're going, right? We want our kids to be successful as they move through our system, not just in the immediate. So I'd be interested in those two.
So I think you make some great points, Trustee Maestas, and just from a transportation lens, I just want to point out the differences between scenario 2 and scenario 6, which they're both viable from transportation lens. But with high school starting at 8:30, we have to make a decision. Do elementary start closer to the 8 a.m. hour, or do they start closer to the 9 a.m. hour, which is really the difference between scenario 2 and scenario 6. So, I mean, those are all things that we've taken into consideration, and hopefully that the data points can substantiate the reasoning for what we're requesting for or recommending for scenario 6. But the only other option we would have would be to double our assets. And now we do have enough physical assets. I mean, as you see, we have yellow buses even parked here. But that, we would need another 30 to 35 bus drivers, people to drive the buses. And you know, right now in the current climate, that's not possible either. So, I mean, there's some great, definitely conversations to have. But those are really what we're looking at as far as where do we put elementary in relation to the 8:30 high school start time.
You know, and part of the conversation, that's what today is. It's a workshop, so it's different than the regular report piece, so we can have this dialogue. We really thought long and hard about that 9 o'clock start. That means we're going to have a lot of kids at school because parents need to work, and we don't know that we can get all of those folks to be able to do the before school care. After school care, it really is is the spaces that are available, right? So those could be in ACES or those that we have staffing for. If we don't have staffing for, then you're not part of ACES. At the beginning of the morning, what do we do there if we've got hundreds of kids that need to be at school and we don't have someone to care for them? So that's something we thought about. It maybe look different in a couple of years, but I know this year it's just that's something that caused us to pause because of the not daycare. It's really the enrichment and remediation and that care for children at the beginning. But all good thoughts, you know, good considerations.
Go ahead if you have something to.
Oh, I had a question. Okay, so this has to deal with just different. Okay, so I didn't know if our students are still being bused. I need to walk to school if they're 2 miles out. I know when we did that because we didn't have enough campuses and we were cutting budgets and all of that stuff. So we moved the walking distance from 1 mile to 2 miles, and that was a very big deal in this community, just because it was. So have we moved it back to 1 mile out? We have not. We've kept it at 2 miles.
I'm not aware of that change because I wasn't here, but I did want to respond to this particular topic because there's a lot of work that went into this that Trustee Mejia would vouch for in the process of hearing from people who shared that there may be inadequate walk spaces to school in different areas of the district. So we spent the better part of 3 to 4 months going to principals and me interviewing principals and actually going out into those areas. And some of the scenarios, including scenario 6, include increased bus service in those areas that we deem as an inadequate walk space. So from an equity perspective, you know, these are the start times, right? And we're kind of we're talking about how that impacts the later school start overall. With different clients that I've worked with, there's generally there's still a benefit even in Modesto for the later school start time for high school because we're sending buses out at the 5 o'clock hour right now for zero period. Mm-hmm. And so that won't happen now till the 6 o'clock hour. So those students aren't accessing zero period right now because it is, I believe, so early in the morning. So there are some good benefits to those things. And also, as we kind of look at the system, like from a holistic perspective, there are so many other puzzle pieces that are big wins right now with some of these scenarios, including 6. We're going to be able to offer some better service in the middle of the day, before and after, because we can reutilize assets to make sure that the students with our greatest needs aren't waiting at high school campuses in the afternoon and the morning to be shuttled places. There's going to be some more direct busing routes. There's going to be some good things that come for our students that are enrolled in Elliott and G230 and TOPS and those different programs. So I just wanted to point a couple of those things out to you guys, because some of these scenarios, like, they don't rip the whole Band-Aid off. They don't solve every problem, because you've got boundaries coming. You've got all these other factors that really change the puzzle again. But there's several scenarios where, 6 in particular, where students really benefit from the way that the bus system can operate. And what has happened, some consequences of the whole Senate Bill 328 movement in California, it basically takes the student's day and turns it clockwise, just a hair. So we have buses getting back at 11 to 11:30 at night from sports trips now, because some school districts have already changed their bell times to start later. So it's interesting, all the different consequences of this that weren't thought out. Because California is not a state that requires transportation for all their students like other states do. And I work in those other states as well on projects. So it's just some perspective for you on some of the really great work that's gone into behind the scenes. And I'm very appreciative of the people in this room that participated on the task force. We're able to do some really good things for students with this work.
Good, because I just want to make sure that we could reduce the add students in a smaller radius to be able to walk, to be able to ride the bus to school instead of walk, because it didn't seem fair to me that some parents have a car and can drive them 2 miles out, and a lot of parents don't. So, or they've left for work early and they can't assist in that. So when we did that, I was always hoping we'd move back to 1 mile out like we used to have it. So it would help the families, especially in neighborhoods that were challenged. So thank you.
I have Trustee West, but I first wanted to comment on that particular part. I remember one of the big things that's been brought up to my attention, Downey and our students from South Modesto, and the saturation of space in the bus, right, and the little amount of buses that we have, and seeing our current scenario, it makes perfect sense why that happens, right? We're on top of each other, staggered. And I was definitely looking at scenario 5 and scenario 6, and as to what Trustee Maestas mentioned about, being able to have our students also get a good rest, right? And I was torn between scenario 5 and scenario 6, but I think that given also that information around, adding buses and making sure that our students that are a little bit further away have the adequate transportation and adding routes, all right? I remember one of the first things I learned is like our students from Airport District don't get busing to La Loma, and we're talking about safe routes to schools, and we have a major intersection, which is Yosemite Boulevard, right in between those two neighborhoods, and them having to do that cross if there's no transportation from parents on their own. That's as part of the work that we're hoping that through this that we're able to have more buses for. So I'm definitely, if that's the scenario, I'm definitely, I know that it's for both, but it gives me a little bit more ease with scenario 6.
That bus service started today for those kids at La Loma.
Perfect. Awesome.
So we added 2 bus routes on that side, and then I have a meeting on the 4th with other executives in the district to discuss the impacts of that same rationale of the main arterials for the elementary schools in that area, to look at that from a standardized perspective, to provide that same service.
That's great. Trustee West?
Thank you. That was close to my heart as well. The students who had to cross Yosemite to get to La Loma and just an unsafe situation. So I'm glad that we're working on that. My question was just our timeline. So this is going to go back for discussion, and when will the final decisions be made?
So as far as really next steps moving forward, it's on that last slide. The piece that we're working on this week is really around the instructional minutes, and the committee work around the instructional minutes. Once we land on the communication out on the instructional minutes, because that's the whole package, that's the beginning of the day and also the end of the day, we'll be communicating that out to managers and staff and teachers, planning to put that out at the early part of March, so folks can have plenty of time to be able to do the planning that they need, either as a parent for childcare or teachers in adjusting, and also the before school care, the before school programming that we need to put together. Mr. Herbst texted me and reminded me that the ELO dollars do not count for the high school district. With that said, there's still plenty of dollars with our COVID relief and also the supplemental concentration dollars that we have to be able to support our before school programming. So, long story short, in this next couple weeks, that information is going to get out because we know that it's important to the community and to our staff as well.
And
Mr.
Board
Hahn.
President Lopez, I did want to just address the Downey Bussing situation. So in scenario 6 in particular, we are adding 2 buses in the area around, of course I draw a blank, where we have hundreds of kids waiting on one corner, like Hatch and I can't remember the thoroughfare. I'm really sorry.
Hatch and Dallas, Hatch.
Dallas and Marin. Dallas, Marin, Hatch. We're moving and creating bus stops away from another. So the district implemented an electronic routing program that actually identifies where the students live. And so now for this year, we will actually be able to register everybody who's going to ride the bus and assign them the safest stop close to them. So that's also a large improvement to the system.
Thank you so much for that work. You know, I know it's been an issue for a lot of our parents, so I'm appreciative that that's going on. Is there any other questions or comments from our board members? No. Oh. Okay, seeing none, this is a report only. Thank you so much, Mr. Hahn, Mr. Surley, and everyone in your team for the work that you've been doing. We really appreciated this conversation. And we'll be moving on to B2, report on Modesto City Schools English Learner Roadmap. And as mentioned before, Superintendent Noguchi, this is a conversation that a lot of the board members want to bring up from our time at our conference at CSBA. So we have Ms. Mota, who's going to give us a quick report and also some interaction between us, right?
Yes, my teacher side's going to come out, so you will be participating in an activity. So just bear with me.
She's going to be pairing up. Be careful, she was going to call on you. I told her we weren't going to do that, so I had your back today.
Yeah, I was, being honest. I was going to call on you. I was going to have sticks and all, but it's okay. I'll take volunteers.
Yeah.
And if you don't volunteer, I'll just go stand next to you. So I will be moving a little bit. So I'm Marisela, good evening, Board President Lopez, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Noguchi, Cabinet, and members of the public. I'm Marisela Mota, Director 2 of English Learner Services, and we're going to give you a brief overview of the English Learner Roadmap. There's a lot of details to the English Learner Roadmap, but you're going to get a brief overview today. So the purpose of our workshop today is to review a little bit of our English learner data, just brief overview, provide an overview of the EL roadmap. In particular, we're going to focus on the 4 principles, and then we're going to engage, or you will engage in a roadmap activity, but I'll also give you an example of the activity. And then lastly, we'll examine how, we'll give you some examples of some of the things we've done that are driven by the California EL roadmap and how they align to it. I think that's a value as well. So again, this workshop aligns to, we want to ensure that we have great instruction the first time for all our students, but with my hat in particular for our English learners. English learner growth, we want to increase targeted professional development in ELD, and this will be for integrated and designated. PLC teams, culturally responsive instruction, and then leadership development. Other goals, it's important to increase regular two-way communication with our parents, families, etc. And improve customer service for our students, families, staff, and community, just to support overall our students. So I'm going to move around a little bit. Hopefully I don't mess this up too much. But yeah, so I'm going to pass out a California English Learner Roadmap that will assist you with today's activity. Actually, I'll sit down. Inside your English Learner Roadmap, what I included for you is an acronyms page, just for some of the acronyms, because people tell me I think in acronyms a lot, so I do. So you'll have that. Then you'll have page 19 of the English Learner Roadmap, and this has a brief overview of all the 4 principles. I also created a worksheet for you that we will be working on it together, just to help guide us with the roadmap. And then you also have a copy of the presentations. My teacher voice, I didn't want to pass it out to you because I knew you guys would be looking at it before. So I wanted to explain it first, but I'll pass it to you right now.
That's so funny, she's gonna pass it out anyway.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
You will need probably a pen and a highlighter.
So everything that we're doing tonight with you was in the thought of experiencing as a classroom person. So including, as we talked about, when we would pass items out, we thought, well, what would a student do with them? They would start and jump in right away. So again, we're going to walk you through it just as if you were in the classroom with us.
Okay, now that you have everything, if you could please take out your acronyms page. And I know we've reviewed it a lot, perfect. But we'll review a little bit more. I'm just going to touch a little bit on some of the programs. So Dlac and Elac, so those are both our English Learner Advisory Committees for the district. One is from the district perspective and one is from the site perspective. Then we also have EL, of course, that's an English learner. When I speak about ELD, which is English Language Development, it's with a lens of designated and integrated ELD. Designated is that class or time set aside for English learners to have access to language development, while integrated ELD is having those science, math, core subjects that also integrate language development. GRIT is probably a new one, and that is our graduation rate intervention team. So this started this year, and it has different members from the district and also members of the site administration. And what we've been doing is looking at data, and there's different people there for different perspectives. So we have school leadership, since they oversee the schools. We have student support services, a lead from that, special education, and then myself for the voice of the English learners. And then we meet with site administrators, so the whole team, and we discuss different data pieces, and then they come up with a plan, and then we, as district support, we try to support them implement that vision for their student and staff. State seal by literacy, that is one of the end goals for our English learners and other students as well, for them to be biliterate in more than one language. Trying to see if I missed anything. DLA, Dual Language Academy, that is a program that we have our Bret Hart and Henshaw currently, and we're going to discuss that because biliteracy is a big thing in our English Learner Roadmap, so that's why I wanted to specifically put that up there. So let's start with our MCS EL data. So I broke it out by K-8 and 9-12 district, just so you would have a different perspective. So you can see the importance of this for our district, especially at the K-8 system. because we have about 35.71% of our students in K-8 are English learners. And then we still have a significant amount in 9-12 at 15%. Our reclassified students at K-8 is about 10%. And then for 9-12 is 28%. Total, if we want to look TK-12, that's English learners. We have 25% English learners for our whole K-12 district. And a total of like 19% for our reclassified students for K-12 as well. Then below I added economically disadvantaged Hispanic and top languages. It has an asterisk because this is of our current English learners. So it's not of our total population, it's of our current English learners. I took this data, there's a lot of different data pieces, but I took it straight from Tom's just because we're doing summative LPAC testing so I can see who is economically disadvantaged, who's Hispanic in our top languages. So of our English learners, we have 94% of them that are economically disadvantaged in K-8, and then 88% of them in 9-12. 89% of our English learners are Hispanic in K-8 and 82% in 9-12. And then our top languages are Spanish, Farsi, and Arabic. And I did break down the languages a little bit more just to give you perspective because we're going to discuss a little bit further our languages. So we have about 6,500 of our English learners that their primary language or their parents' primary language is Spanish. 115 are Arabic, 130 are Farsi, and 95 students are Pashto speaking. And then following up with that, we have our Cambodian or Khmer students. Khmer, thank you. And 96. So that is our top languages here at Modesto City Schools for both districts.
I want to add that the PowerPoint that Antoinette printed is in color, if it helps you to see it in color.
So next, we're going to go over our overview of our English learner roadmap. Again, important because we have so many English learners here at Modesto City Schools. So we'll begin with what is the roadmap. So the EL roadmap was approved in 2017 by the California State Board of Education. The roadmap sets a guidance or a vision for welcoming and educating our English learners. The vision is to have English learners attain high level of English proficiency, mastery of grade level standards, and opportunities to develop in multiple languages. So that's the overall arching goal of the roadmap. It also, throughout the roadmap, it makes it clear that everyone in our district is responsible to educating our English learners. So it doesn't matter where you are, if you have an English learner, it is our responsibility to educate them, including myself. So with that, we have to ensure that we value their identity, their languages, and their cultures, and they're all different. There's different typologies of English learners. It is also good to point out that the roadmap is not a law that states the rights for English learners, although there are laws that exist, but this is not that document. This is more of a guiding principle to give us a vision for our English learners. So it's a little blurry on the page, but you have a copy of page 19 in your EL roadmap. I just thought it was a good document from the whole roadmap that shows you, if you had to state it in one page, this is the page I would pick from it. So this is a good graphic that demonstrates that there are 4 principles. So there they are right there. In each of those principles, there's elements that lead to the end result. The end result is that we want the goal that our students have a 21st century education, mastery in academics, and multilingual proficiency when possible. So within each principle, you'll notice such phrases, and this is where I would have called you to state some of the phrases, but I'll do it for you. So for principle 1, just some that we can touch on. Principle 1 is assets oriented and needs responsive schools. So that's the principle. Some elements that go along with it are that our school climate is inclusive and safe for English learners. Our educators collaborate to support our English learners with disabilities, because we could have students that are dual that are both English learners and SPED students as well. And then, do our schools build strong partnerships with families, especially to support our English learners? Principle 2 is intellectual quality of instruction and meaningful access. Some things that I highlighted or I thought were important is our instruction scaffolded? Do we have differentiation and scaffold supports for our English learners? But not overly scaffolded either. They have to be able to also apply the work. Do we have high expectations for our EL students? Do we believe that they can make growth and that they can access as well? Is language development integrated across curriculum? And this goes to our integrated ELD. Principle 3 is our system conditions that support effectiveness. Is our leadership committed to our EL achievement? Do we make a point to ensure that we have data on our English learners that's always on our mind as leaders? And then principle 4 is alignment and articulation with and across systems. Do our schools provide extra time and support for our English learner students before, after school, etc.? And you can see that on page 19 of your actual roadmap if you want to see it in color and not the black and white version. So again, the EL roadmap has 4 principles. I won't read them to you, but I'll give you just a brief definition of each. So number 1, this principle focuses or sets forth the belief and understanding that the languages and cultures that our English learners bring to our education system are assets, and for their own learning and important contributions to learning community. So do we use our languages to thrive them and to make progress in their English language? An example of this could be cognates, so hint to there for later on if you would like to use that. Principle 2 focuses on curriculum, instruction, promise of rigorous and relevant curriculum for improving EL achievement, provided that students have the support they need in order to participate and comprehend and have full access to such curriculum. This principle embraces the new California standards in ELA and ELD, so the framework. Principle 3 states that effective, comprehensive, and coherent programs and services for ELs can only occur if the system supports building the necessary skills for staff to implement those, so training. This involves hiring and building leaders with the skills and understanding to establish locally appropriate goals and commitments to our English learners' curriculum, access towards our goal, towards English proficiency, academic achievement, and also participation. And the last one, Principle 4, affirms that California's goal for English learners goes beyond them being proficient and reclassified. It's the way I see it, it's do they have access through A through G and to go beyond the K-12 system. We want to ensure that ELs graduate and are prepared for higher education and civic participation. I'll pause for any questions here. No questions so far? Although this is a roadmap, there's also, I want to point out that there's also specific toolkits for teachers where they go over each of the principles, but how to bring it into the classroom as well. And it has good examples, non-examples, and it also says, if you're not in the classroom, what are other ways that you can be doing that principle that's outside of the classroom. But we're not going to just be discussing those toolkits today. So I gave you a lot of information, but I'm also going to give you a resource. So if you go to your English Learner Roadmap, to page 13. Once we go to the activity, I think you'll need the roadmap, the page 19, and your worksheet to be able to participate. So you'll need those three things. Which I won't read you the roadmap, but you're focusing on page 13 through 17. But before we go into that, so what we're going to discuss is, I gave you a brief overview, and I'm going to have you read it on your own or with your partner. But how are these principles, or how can we make these principles of value for English learners here at Modesto City Schools? So we have some examples for you later on, but I also think it's good to get your input to see maybe what you already see in our system, or maybe something that you saw somewhere else that we could implement here. So it's a good opportunity for feedback. So I'm going to do a think aloud of what I'm going to want you to do on your worksheet. So right now, if you could please pull out your EL Roadmap for Guiding Principles worksheet. It's the double-sided page where it has boxes for you. So I have a question here for you that says, what are MCS examples that align with the 4 principles? But if you don't want to use MCS examples because you saw something that you saw in another district or somewhere else, that's fine too. Just anything that aligns with the 4 principles. Again, in Spanish, because if we're valuing our languages and we said Spanish was the language we value, ¿cuáles son los ejemplos aquí en este distrito que se alinean con los 4 principios? Again, you can barely see, but align and alinean highlighted because they're cognates for our students. So ideally, this would be amazing. We could do this in every single classroom, valuing the English language with other languages and also pointing out our cognates. We also included some sentence frames. So I will be using this to give you an example of how I would go through this process. So the first one is just an example that aligns with the vision of the EL roadmap is, and you would come up with an example. This example aligns with principle number, all you would have to do is 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or if you feel that you could even explain it further, because we want to make sure we have differentiation in there, is an example that aligns with the vision of the EL roadmap is blank. This example aligns with principle number 1, 2, 3, or 4 because, and then you can expand on your thinking because that might trigger something for someone else. So if I'm thinking out loud, I'm just going to do my think out loud. So looking at principle 1, looking at it, it's assets oriented, need responsive schools. Looking at this where it says we build strong partnerships with families and we have a school climate that's safe. If I look at the roadmap, I can see that element A says language and cultures for English learners are assets. So this is where I would be thinking, okay, partnerships, languages and cultures are assets. So an example, so I'm going to use a sentence frame. An example that aligns with the vision of the EL roadmap is hiring bilingual staff. So simple example, but an example. This example aligns with principle number 1 because it ensures that our schools or district affirm our parents and our students' languages. It also supports building strong family and school or district partnerships. So that's what we're going to do in this activity. We're going to look at the different principles. We're going to come up with different examples. Again, they could be what you know of MCS or ideas that you have on your own, but you're going to try to pull out some examples that align with principle 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you don't know the roadmap, it could be a little bit overwhelming, so you're going to be in partners. Luckily, you're already in partners in a sense. So the 2 of you can be partners together. The 2 or the 3 of you can be partners together, and then the 2 of you. Perfect. I'm going to do the thumbs up, thumbs down. If you understood the assignment, put a thumbs up so I know. If not, I'll repeat it.
One for every group. That's perfect.
Perfect. Then we'll move forward. I'll give you 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll gauge the time from there for you to discuss the 4 principles in different ways you see as an examples. I will walk around just in case you have any questions. Uh-huh.
I'm going to use another example. Yep. So I could put, just to make sure that, checking for understanding here.
Okay.
An example that aligns to the vision of EL roadmap is parent ambassadors. Well, the parent, sorry, well, but you guys can do it too. So
Yeah.
parent ambassadors,
it.
and that aligns to principal one because it works to connect parents with programs and resources and services at the school.
That's a perfect example. You may
Can't
use
use
it. You
parent
have
ambassador.
space there. It's okay.
Oh. All right.
So go ahead and
So how much time do they have?
Teacher should
5
copy
to
it off my
7
page.
minutes. All of them, whichever one you prefer. If you want to do all, do all. If you have one that is important to you, do that one.
I'm going to help
You're
these
gonna
guys.
carry this group.
Thanks, thanks a lot.
Might still be hot.
I know, because that's the front and center.
So that means we get carried.
Oh, no. I was saying she had to do the work.
Yeah, oh yeah, that was good. I like that. I like that. That was really great.
Yes, I didn't mean
No, no, no,
that we
no,
were.
I thought it was good. No, it was good. Okay, so. Intellectual quality of instruction and access. So I. You know, you have a. First through sixth grade, students have opportunity to take early languages too. I think those are both, options for us to have, access. The only thing I learned was electrical systems. So. Is that right? Yeah. That's, I put dual language and language as two quality programs for intellectual quality of instruction and for access. So I can't say that we have as much access as I'd like, but. Sorry, right? Yeah.
And I think sometimes the like something that I'll share with dual language too.
Okay, good. Okay, good. And it's culturally, I think dual language is good culturally.
Right. I think with the state of bioliteracy, the field of bioliteracy also.
Anytime this
Yeah,
construction
that's right. Bioliteracy, that's perfect. That's great.
adding to increase it.
Expand that.
So how do you think that went?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Don't feel bad. I thought it was funny. I thought it was great. I just want to make a joke out of it. It's fun. Yeah. I was just making a joke. Don't take it. But I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
No,
I
no,
just
no.
said it was
I
funny.
didn't want to,
Yeah.
I didn't want to, I thought maybe you got offended by it, so I was like,
Oh, no. I thought it was funny. I didn't. Good idea. And language is spiritual values. So we have those.
And I don't know if this
That to me is very good language is intellectual quality. I don't know, it might translate to some of these other ones.
I think you can find them in, they overlap.
Oh, yeah.
One of the ones that I thought about was number 4, was our new, civic, state seal, the civic
I got that
engagement.
too. I was gonna see, I see it's a civic participation. I was thinking, I wanted to put it in there, but I was thinking it might go
Well,
with
again,
number
it
2.
could go there too, but this is civic participation.
I think that's right. Right. That's the,
yes.
still a civic participation.
So when we put a club, or dance is coming up.
Programs, and we just
Organizations that support effectiveness.
That's something that the school can do. Languages. I did, that was my example for principal one. Yeah, or advertisement.
Right, but that would be more of a tree. What she say she's putting more as a one?
She did that as one. That also was.
Yeah. One thing that was. Talking about the.
Right,
Of our
Yeah.
teachers.
Oh, yeah, hard to stuff.
Yeah, but I really like the
Yeah,
building
I think you're right. Yes.
giving, I don't know.
I agree.
It's like all the principals, yeah,
ROTC is
because
the
it's a
junior,
system-wide change.
like getting ready for the military.
Yeah, sorry, EOPs.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
Right now, it's just teachers.
Yeah, that's the, I know what you're talking about. It's the career one.
The career
Yes,
work.
right. I
So-
can't remember what it stands for either.
So-
It's probably occupational programs, something, educational occupation. Occupational program.
So having something like that, or we're starting a program that's going to attract our students into a path to teachers.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so,
Oh, okay. It's a pretty
Need to get a nap catcher.
Apparently.
What's going on?
Or like pathways, PE pathways?
TP, but it
But it was
used to be called
EOP. Oh.
yeah, EOP something.
It's new, to me, the EOP is new language arts, because it's government funding, possibly.
More like
I don't know, but it's educational opportunity program. But it's like supports career pathways for students that might go into education, so.
Welding, it used to be for like welding, so that technical design.
That would be
That's
cool
right,
when
which is-
that's for the
They're
fire.
pathways,
Yeah,
Exactly, so
pathways.
So having, when we were talking about it last board meeting about how we want to homegrown more teachers, right? She's like, there's more of a fast track for students to go from high school to college to
CIPD?
back into our system, right? Right, like, I know like,
This pair right here, she did, they went ahead and found the.
I showed it to him. Okay, I believe we're ready. Okay, so that was your think, pair, share activity. I didn't give you much thinking time. I apologize for that, but you did get to work with your partner and share. So again, what are MCS examples or other examples that you want to see here in our district? And again, there is a sentence frame. If you would like to use it, please do so. If you want to use your own sentence frame, that's fine too. I'll take volunteers at this point to share their ideas.
I'll share, maybe we'll go one at a time. I got a lot, but I'll just share
Okay.
one. So an example that aligns with the vision of the EL roadmap is when in schools, school signs such as like dances, advertisement for dances, clubs, or you have signs within the classroom that have rules. That all of those are in multiple languages, maybe Spanish, Farsi, Arabic, those that the school has common students in it, to really show that those languages are important, and that we're advertising to all kids, not just those that could read English.
Perfect. Great example. Thank you. I'll take another volunteer. I was.
An example that aligns with the vision of the EL roadmap are our EL counselors at our high schools. This example aligns with Principle 2 because our EL counselors support students in the appropriate courses, and EL students are provided access to full curriculum and college and career guidance.
Another great example.
Yeah, we had we worked on number 3 especially, and we mentioned creating a homegrown program for teachers that have that background of biliteracy, and so that we include CTE framework around teaching during high school, and then on to four-year and credentialing programs.
And beyond. And they come
Back.
back to us. Perfect.
All right, I'll give another one. An example that aligns with the vision of the EL roadmap is our work on equitable grading. This aligns primarily right now with Principle 2, because that's within the classroom, and it's relevant to supporting the needs of our students inside the classroom by teacher. However, when that also could be in Principle 3, because it is currently a professional development that we have teachers going through in a cohort. And then if that becomes a wider policy, it becomes Principle 4, because it's articulated by the entire district and the entire system changes from it. So it was quite an interesting cross, an example that aligns across the roadmap.
Yeah, and some of these will be interrelated. They are interrelated principles, so they will cross over in multiple principles. Any other examples?
We have our dual language program, and I think it's 1st through 6th grade now. Did it expand to 6th grade?
Maybe TK through 8.
TK through 8th. All right, right on. And just thinking about that it would be great if we could expand it and have either more languages besides English and Spanish, but also have more opportunities in another school site on another side of town that might give opportunity to students to learn dual language, because I know a lot of parents that will love to do that. In fact, I just had a call from somebody moving here from another country. There was a lady that contacted me and said they wanted their child to go to a certain dual language school, and they chose to put them, because where they're living, in another school district, because they had opportunity to do that. And I thought, oh man, if we just had it where we are, they would have chosen our district. So that was mine.
So those were all great examples. So I know you probably have more because I saw them written on your paper. Just for time purposes, we will move on. These are just some that we thought of as a team in our CIPD team. So we thought of bilingual community aides, and the reason this was on our mind is because we just hired a bilingual community aide in our department that's Farsi, Dari, and Pashto speaking. It's something we're really proud of. It took us a long time to hire him, but we're blessed that he's with our in our department, because it gives us access to so many more parents, just because he does know the culture, he does know the language. And even though we were using Language Link, which is up there, it's just having that face-to-face interaction is just so much better. Although I did put language link up there too, because there are some languages where maybe it's just 1 or 2 students. That doesn't mean it's less important. It's still of importance. So we still need to be able to communicate with those parents as well. Other things are TC2 translators that we have at sites, our paraprofessionals. The seal of biliteracy is another way we promote our languages. With that seal of biliteracy, I think it was last year was our first year that we created our own district assessment to give students access to earning the seal in different languages. So we took all our assessments, and I believe we have an Pashto, Vietnamese, different languages. So if they meet the pre-qualifications, they can sign up for certain assessments to earn the seal in a language other than Spanish. So pointing that out. Our parent center, again, in our parent center, we have a lot of different things in different languages just because, and they're culturally represented. We also offer school tours for our parents and family, especially if they're feeling anxious about our new school system. We have one of our bilingual community aides or myself will go with them to the school. We do drive them just because they don't have transportation. And then our parent classes, we've been expanding on a little bit more. And we've also been working from our department to align our services for ELs and students with disabilities. So we've been trying to work really well, their division with Chris Romero, Christy Allen, and myself, just to make sure that our alignment is the same for our dual students that are English learners and students with disabilities. And then for curriculum and instruction, having that guaranteed and viable curriculum, making sure that we have access to the curriculum and that we're using it. Again, we put language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling letters, SIOP, which is our Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, but also our coaching supports that come from our office. They do different coaching supports like scaffolds, differentiation, goal setting, looking at the data analysis for our different students. And we're working on our systematic professional development to ensure that every single teacher, long-term has access to the right PD to support our English learner students. Again, programs there, we put Dual Language Academy, a newcomer program, which is the Language Institute. But if you notice in our Dual Language Academy, we've always had K-8. For next year, we will be expanding to TK, so TK will be new for next year. And we're still working on the 9-12 pathway. Right now, our classes are selected. We're just ensuring that our numbers are there to continue that for the high school. The classes, this means Mgc Dual Enrollment for our dual language students, so they have access to an English and Spanish class to continue their DLA Academy for high school and beyond. So systems, again, the GRIT meetings, this has been eye-opening for all of us because it gives us an insight of maybe what we need to work on as a district to improve our system. A through G meetings, because we want to make sure our students have access beyond K-12. Administrator walkthroughs, administrator pipelines, these are things that we need to be ensuring that we give them professional development. So again, that their teachers also have that professional development so that their students are supported. Again, I just put committees are Elac and Dlac, and we do have our EL master plan as well. Again, the last one is just Mgc Dual Enrollment, the state seal of biliteracy assessment. School schedules is on there. I know that's not something we think of, but if all our English learners need to have an ALD course, then we need to have systems in place so that they have access to both ALD and also electives, and that is through their 0 and 8th period. So it was great hearing that conversation that the people before us were speaking about. Just wanted to throw different partnerships too. Grant partnerships, the different grant partnerships that we have. There is a dual language one out there right now. And then our migrant partnership, because our migrant students just have different needs as well. So this is all how we create a system to support our English learners across. I know that's a lot, and there's probably a lot more examples for those that we didn't think of, but just some that I wanted to point out. So what are our next steps? We need to continue to increase our professional development for integrated and designated ELD. This includes many things, looking at the data. The teachers need to know who their English learners are. They need to make sure that they know what the data is telling them, and then we need to ensure that the students have guaranteed and viable curriculum, and that more teachers are SIOP trained as well. We need to continue our training with LPAC. That is one of the methods we reclassify, and also strengthening our ELACs at our sites, because those are our partnerships and ways we bring parents involved in our school through ELAC is one of the ways. We need to increase our support and outreach to families. We've been working with Madi's department, which I forget their name. That includes the parent ambassadors as well. They just spoke at our Dlac meeting, and we just spoke to their parent ambassadors last Friday from 5 to 6. Just so if they're out there sharing the supports for English learners, they have to know the support. So it was a little training for them as well. Our next steps is we need to continue to align our work with other divisions. English learners are everywhere, so working with parent engagement office so that the, oh my God, I just blanked out, sorry. So that the supports they offer for parents vary from the supports that we offer parents, so they have multiple supports. Also, align our work with educational services so that we're all aligned with what we share to principals and teachers, etc. And then, of course, align our work with special education. Like, we all need to be working together for the same goal of our English learners. So those are some of our next steps. Questions?
Thank you very much. I always like to make a point to go out to the public.
Oh, sorry.
There's none out there, so we're going to bring it back to the board members. I already saw Trustee Irvin have his hand up. Trustee Maestas, Trustee Mejia. Vice President Brown, you had a question?
Not a question, but a comment.
Okay, so we got you towards the end. You had a question, comment? No? Okay. All right, Trustee Irvin?
My
Oh,
comment was back to one of the earlier slides. It said that the roadmap makes it clear that everyone involved in our schools has a responsibility to educate English learners. And what I appreciate about this presentation tonight, even though I've not been able to participate in the activity, is that it highlighted the fact that we as board members share in that responsibility to educate English learners well. And so I appreciate you involving us and helping us see what the process is and what the things are that we need to be aware of, and keeps our focus. I think we have a real balanced approach and concern as board members that we adequately address in every way possible all of our ELA students, and appreciate the efforts that your department is putting forward to help us do that.
Thank you.
thank you very much, Vice President Brown. Trustee Irvin?
Yes, I just wanted to know, was it, because I added, because I know all this was internal, but we also have some external partners that also play a role, because I added, like to 3, I added about the system conditions that support effectiveness. I like PK and promotores. Also, I was thinking about the bridge with the Cambodian community, and so utilizing those as a way as cross systems and stuff. So I didn't know, was that okay since there wasn't internal, but external, and we work with them in terms of those supports and partnerships and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's completely fine. I added migrant partnership because that's not something we do. It's something through our Region 3 in Merced, but it was just on my brain because we have the DSA coming up. But yes, that is another example of it.
Thank you, but I did enjoy like as a board member, being able to walk through this process helps me make a connection. Yeah.
Trustee Maestas?
All right, thanks. Yeah, thank you for this. It was very detailed, insightful. I have one question, and it's like many things that I ask for is data oriented. So I'm wondering if I can gather some data on the proportion of SPED students in our district that are also EL. There was a study done not too long ago about how English language learners are 80% more likely to be classified as SPED than non-ELs. And it might not be that they're actually SPED, it might be that they are just English language learners. So that was just something that came up in I think I was at a conference, it might have been CSBA that I heard that. So I'd be interested in knowing what we have in our district to see if that tracks.
We can put together the board communication
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the number off the top of my head,
Oh,
but
yeah, that's fine.
It is a common misdiagnosis.
and I know we do have a process for SSTs where we're involved in, where we do give a language assessment. We use the Woodcock menus to compare their English and Spanish if it's Spanish, just to see if it makes a difference for that student. And that's something we work with SPED. But I'll write a board communication with the SPED and ELs, and I'll break it down by site as well.
I'm sorry, I can't lay off the subject. Do you mind if I?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, guys. We're going to talk SPED. I got to. You hit the nail on the head. That conference is spot on. The SELPA has undergone considerable training on that very issue, in part because years before you became a trustee, when I ran the SELPA, over-identification of our English language learners was a big focus. So recently, I'm not familiar with the data off the top of my head. I know back in the day we were making substantial progress. My guess is we'll still see good progress, but yeah, I'll be happy to work with you and write a board communication on that topic.
Put in longitudinal data on that as well.
Thanks. Trustee Mejia?
I have well, thank you for the activity. I think it was very, very good, very good. But one of my things, and also I'd like to share my experience in some of this stuff. But on migrant partnerships, I remember when I was to school, we had a very strong migrant partnership with migrant education, where like paraprofessionals from them would come to our, even do home visits with us, because there's a lot of us at our house. But I'm just wondering if we're maximizing those partnerships with them. And then also another program that I think it's important that we kind of keep, I don't know how big they are now, but it's California Mini Corps. That's how I worked at the schools, in Modesto City schools. And I feel like those are also opportunities for us to recruit there, because I think almost every single person that leaves that program becomes a teacher. So making that maybe even stronger, figuring out ways to really train those students, because they're eager, they're in college, they're working, but at the same time, they starting to work with them more closely to provide them opportunities, to engage more with our district. So just a comment on that front.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions or comments? If not,
I was going to respond to his migrant. We do work with Migrant 3 region. We work with them in 2 different capacities. So one, we work with Estela and Richard on the data process of it. And then we work with Amelia and Rosa for the system of summer school, etc. There will be some changes for our summer school. We will be owning our own migrant students and ensuring that we provide them the summer school, of course, with their supports. But for our K-8 system, we have over about 200, so we need to ensure that we are providing them with that access for summer school as well. So that's our first thing we're doing this summer, actually.
great. Thanks. Is there any other comments around this report?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for the report. Ms. Mota and Ms. Odell. It's a lot of very informational. I know that a lot of us had it on our radar, and we're glad that we're working through this and that we're growing. And along with that, we have some great information in our EL department, right?
Mm-hmm. So just this is just information for the board. In cabinet today, we did approve, and actually this is news to you too, Ms. Mota. We did approve an additional EL position Dr. Adele, what was the position, what's the title of the position?
The
It's her old position, special assigned English learner, special assignment administrator.
Okay. So you'll see that coming through the board probably 4 to 6 weeks, because we'll have to post, we'll have to interview, and that'll be moving forward. Really continuing the investment with what I shared, 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, and that is the development and the increasing of an EL department here in Modesto City. So that'll be a nice addition in addition to those individuals that we hired on this year too. So that will help with our programming.
Great, thank you so much, and I'm glad to hear that. So with that, we come to the end of our meeting for tonight. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Trustee Maestra, seconded by Trustee Mejia. All those in favor say aye. Aye. I see Vice President Brown saying aye as well, so passes unanimously. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week on our March 7th meeting at 6 p.m. Have a great night. Bye.
For